Welcome back. So I'll be talking about James Brown, and the topic is money and fame without emotional health are not success. The identities of James Brown's paternal grandparents are uncertain. Edward Evans and Lila Williams are believed to be either his father's parents, both of them, or one is his parent. Unsure, so the other person would be the step parent, both of whom were listed as dead by 1920, at which time James Brown's father and siblings were identified as being the children of Melvin and Joseph Scott, their uncle and aunt respectively. This would kind of make you think that the father, Edward Evans, was his biological father. James Brown's maternal grandfather was Money Baling. Money's parents were both born during slavery, and their names were Stephen Baling, born May 1857, and Sarah, born December 1862, in South Carolina. James Brown's grandparents, Money Baling and Rebecca Bryant Baling, were married and had 5 children together. One of them was Susie Baling, James Brown's mother. James Brown's mother, Susie Baling, was born in rural Collington County, South Carolina on August 8, 1916. His father, Joseph Garner Brown, who was called Pops, was born on March 29, 1911 in Bramwell County, South Carolina. In 1932, at the age of 18, Susie married Joseph Brown. On May 3, 1933, Susie gave birth to their son, James Brown, who some reports indicated was nearly stillborn and had to be revived by his aunt. The family lived in a one-room wooden shack without plumbing, electricity, or windows, very reminiscent of slavery. There are accounts that indicate that Susie abandoned her family and her child when he was 5 years old. And Joseph, the father, and his son relocated to Augusta, Georgia. Sounds like the narrative of Jesus, right? According to this account, Brown's father, Joseph, left him in the care of his aunt, Honey, in Augusta. His aunt, Honey, allegedly ran a brothel, a house for sex workers, which meant that James was left alone and had to fend for himself at an early age. Brown reports that he was a shoeshine boy at some point. I'll share a segment of an interview where he speaks about his early life later. However, the Augusta, Georgia directory records Susie being with her family until 1949, which would mean she remained with him until he was in his teens. Whatever the actual date of her leaving him with his father, they were estranged at some point. That is, Susie, the mother, and James Brown. It would take the efforts of James Brown's second wife, Deidre, to reunite Brown and his mother. The unplanned reunion took place while Brown was performing at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, and his mother was working in New York City as a seamstress in the garment district. However, what is undisputed was that James Brown's father, Joseph, was physically abusive to his mother, Susie, as well as to James Brown. One source indicated that Susie fled to New York City after being threatened with death by her husband, Joseph, if she ever tried to take her only son, James, from him. Further, from Brown's action, we can surmise that at best, James Brown and his mother's relationship was complicated. For example, he took care of her financially near the end of her life, but when she died, though he gave his third wife and father elaborate headstones, he never bought his mother a headstone. And while we're talking about family, James Brown would create a large family of his own. James Brown married 4 times. He wed his first wife, Velma Warren, on June 19, 1953, in Toka, in Augusta County, Georgia. And they had 3 children, Terry, Teddy, and Larry. The marriage ended in divorce in 1969. Next marriage would be to Deidre Jenkins, the one who reunited him with his mother, with whom he had Deanna Crisp, Yama Noyola, Venetia, and Darrow. According to his autobiography, They married on the front porch of the probate judge in Bramwell on October 22nd, 1970, and divorced on January 10th, 1981. In 1984, James Brown married Adrienne Loy Rodriguez. They separated in April 1994 and had no children. The marriage ended when Adrienne died on January 6, 1996 in California from complications following plastic surgery. In December 2001, James Brown married his fourth wife, Tommy Ray Heine, at his home on Beach Island, South Carolina. Their son, James Joseph Brown II, was born on June 11, 2001, although Brown questioned his paternity. Now I'll read a part of an interview he had with a reporter at the BBC. So the reporter asked him, what was his first musical instrument and what was his first music type genre that he liked. My first musical instrument was the guitar and rhythm and blues. I like the old kind, he said. I'm not really a musician, but a self-taught jack of all trades. I play 6 instruments. Reporter, when you were a Shushan boy, did you dream of being a musician? I dreamed then of eating regularly. You did not eat much? I did not have much. My people were very poor, and there was just no way of dreaming of becoming anything more than trying to be a laborer, trying to work. That was all I saw around me. My father was a laborer, stopped in school at the 2nd grade, and there's not a chance for me imagining something too fantastic. That is why at most of my concerts, I usually thank the people for coming out to see the show and making me what I am today. Letting them know that I do appreciate it because they delivered me from so many things. I don't think I could ever repay the people for what they've done for me, but I can keep on being a man and trying to fight for the right of our people. You get used to being in a position to do a lot of things that you never dreamed you would be able to do. But I think my spirit kind of changes along with the environment I'm in, because when I was a juvenile delinquent, I used to dream there in an institution. I would never dream of being outside. And we talked of this before. I think your spirit knows and becomes a part of the environment. Even though you're asleep, it just doesn't give you nothing but reality. It stays with reality. I never dreamed of nothing on the outside. The same way now, I'm able to do a lot of things I dreamed I would be able to do. I never dreamed of poverty. Maybe some other people have it much different, have it different with them. I always remind myself, because I go back. I go to the countries and I see homes where there are 16 and 20 and 18 people are in 2 rooms, Maybe it's one lady or an elderly man taking care of the family. I go around and I find if there's any land for sale and I bring back deeds to them. I think of those old Robin Hood days and Jesse James, not the robbing, but not taking, but giving. I thought it was a fantastic idea. Makes someone feel good inside when they're able to do things like that. This is a beautiful passage. The way from his poverty he tried to give the people somewhere to live. But it's also a sad passage. Yes, his poverty, but the way he speaks so well about the way living in poverty sometimes blinds you to possibilities outside of your reality. So I really appreciated that. How would you define soul music, said the reporter. I've expressed my feelings, my opinions about soul music a million times. Soul music is the deprivation of a man. It is the word can't that makes you a soul singer. One thing has made the black man coming from the States having a heavier soul is because he has had extra hard knocks and has lived with the word can't for so long. So every time he can sing about it, it comes out a little stronger. End quote. So that's him on him, and yeah, the depth of it was really touching. I'll continue. At the age of 12, he was kicked out of school because of poverty, specifically insufficient clothes to wear. He worked at odd jobs and then he engaged in petty survival crimes. This led to his arrest and conviction at the age of 16. He was sentenced to juvenile reform school, but music was always a source of solace for Brown. And this interest increased during his stay in the juvenile detention center, where he met a visiting gospel R&B musician, Bobby Byrd. After his release, Brown would join a band with Byrd, and it was called the Famous Flames. James Brown, the godfather of soul, was a musician, songwriter, phenomenal performer. His influence on popular music in the 20th century cannot be overstated. Brown toured almost non-stop in the late 1950s and 60s. His electrifying live shows featured not just Brown's growing list of hits, but his incredible dancing and showmanship. His mega hit from the time, Papa Got a Brand New Bag, is considered by many to be the very first funk song ever written. In the late 1960s, Brown became active in the struggle for civil rights and social justice for African Americans. In 1968, on the day of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, Brown famously played a live televised concert on TV in Boston in order to head off what was feared to be violent rioting. That year, he also recorded, say it with me, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Come on now, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Brown continued to write massive hits and tour throughout the 1970s. His music was heavily sampled in the burgeoning hip-hop and rap genre in the 1980s. By the late 1980s, however, Brown's turbulent life became more difficult. He spent time in jail, and his personal life for the next decades was punctuated by domestic violence, substance abuse, financial and legal troubles. End quote. Though not inevitable, based on what we know about child development and trauma measurements, such as the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale, and I have a video on that, his so-called turbulent life was expected. This descent into self-harm and harming others was expected but not inevitable. What was unexpected was the miracle of his successful musical career. High-risk behaviors such as drug use and even legal and financial troubles can be consequences of early exposure to interpersonal and interpersonal trauma as well as systemic traumas. Further, children who witness domestic violence are likely to repeat it. Males most often become perpetrators and females most often become victims. And we see that playing out in his life. We hear his children talking about it. This is from his daughter with his second wife, Deidre, and her name is Yama. Quote, "When you see a family member being hurt, you're not feeling the best about the person that's hurting them. I was flat out upset, mad with my dad at that moment. I still go back to that place every now and then, not to belittle my father, but flashing back over my own life and the domestic violence situation in my life, thinking how much that shaped me." The incident she was talking about was when she first observed at the age of 6 her father hitting her mom, and she jumped in to stop it. And then she herself would later become a victim of domestic violence. I continue. This is Yama. "I talk about it in the sense that it happened. It is an unfortunate time in anybody's situation, anybody's life. If they ever had to go through domestic violence, they know what that's like. And it shows that he was a human because he was flawed. but it was also a time to show grace. That's how I think about it. In order to move from that space, you do have to talk about it. You do have to acknowledge that it happened. There was a time I didn't like my father. I didn't like him because of this behavior. I saw a lot growing up. I heard a lot growing up that could have damaged me for life. This abuse that started with his father, James Brown replicated, and then it went on to his children. And we don't know if his grandparents were also abusive, because we keep on repeating these cycles and we call them generational curses. But no, it's us choosing the behaviors instead of resisting them, instead of learning a new way. Fame, money without the inner work is not success. We'll still be living like the worst people on the plantation if we continue to hurt ourselves and others. We have to get to the point that we believe it in our whole hearts that we were born for love, and we were born to love, and we were born to thrive while black. Can you dig it? Are you black and proud? Then say it loud. Thanks for listening.